when you're doing acoustic measurements, and sound insulation measurements in particular, it is required that you use an omnidirectional loudspeaker that is a point source, that it's supposed to emit sound in all directions at once. So that means you cannot use a regular, like PA style loudspeaker, because those are directional. And why do you need an omnidirectional sound speaker for these kinds of applications? Well, if we look at it this way, let's say you have two rooms next to each other, two adjacent rooms. Like so. And you have a separating wall here. And you have flanking transmission from ceiling, floor, and side walls. So when you do a sound insulation measurement in the field, what you get is actually the sum of all these transmission paths. You will have direct sound transmission, you'll have flanking here, you'll have flanking here, it will go down into the floor structure and come out on the other side, and it will also go into the ceiling and come out into the other side. So those are the 5 primary ones, but there are more if you add some ventilation and doors and windows and stuff like that. But let's keep it simple in this case. We look at only these 5 primary paths through each of the flanking connection and the direct transmission. So let's say you put in here an omnidirectional speaker, which you should, then it'll excite all surfaces within the sending room will be excited equally. And that will give you the most reliable result when you do a measurement of how much sound is transferred from this room into this one. If you would instead use a directional speaker, let's say we put one here on the floor. It could be a really strong one, and then it just you emit a lot of sound, but it's directional. And if you do that, maybe you'll only excite the direct partition. Oh, I should use some other color so it's more better. Maybe you will only excite this partition and this partition. But now these two, the ceiling and the other wall here, and the floor for that matter also. Well, you see where I'm coming here. You will not excite all the partitions equally. And that means that in this case you might underestimate the sound or overestimate. Both things are possible, because if you send a lot of energy into a weak transmission path, maybe it'll look worse than what it is, and the other way could go as well. If you neglect to excite this transmission path, for instance, the directional loudspeaker won't send any sound coming that way, and this path is very weak, then you might end up with a measurement result that looks better than what it's supposed to be. Because the sound reduction index, or the sound level difference here, is basically you measure the sound pressure level in the sending room, that's usually called L1, and you measure the sound pressure level in the receiving room, which is called L2. And that means that it's, of course, very important to have proper excitation of the sound field and measurement technique as well. So perhaps if you're all out of luck and in an emergency situation, or you only need to do an indication, perhaps you could use a directional regular PA, those things that you can buy in a music store, for instance. You could use those, but you won't fulfill the measurement requirements according to the standard. Of course, you will get a response, you will get something, but in order to have a reliable, correct measurement, you will need to have an omnidirectional speaker. Because if you do a measurement, how do you know which way my face will be pointing when I'm talking? If it's speech that you want to insulate on. So the only way to be sure is to excite all at once, and that you will do that with an omnidirectional. So that's the key of it. So always use omnidirectional loudspeakers when doing measurements, and that's why. The microphones are also omnidirectional, by the way. See you later.